Hey, welcome everyone to the webinar of how the impact of user experience in SEO and your rankings. We're really excited to be here today and really present how to really take action on the newest Google algorithm update that's coming out. Today we have Bahman Zakeri, the chief strategist from Xivic, your conductor. And we're really excited to jump in today and really break down not only the different metrics that go into core web vitals, then also how we can really take action.
Sure. Okay. Zach seems to be having a little bit of trouble here. Do you guys see or hear me okay? Can you confirm, Aaron? Perfect. Good. So thank you all for joining. I'm Bahman Zakeri, Chief Strategist at Xivic. We have a great agenda here for you where we will be talking about user experience and the impact of that on Google search rankings and overall how to benefit your customers and visitors to your site. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump into why user experience matters. So think of user experience a lot like air in a room. When there's a lot of it, you can breathe easily. You don't even notice it at all. But when there's a short supply of air, you're going to want to bounce. So that's something to keep in mind. That's very much like UX, user experience, and how it impacts websites. It's very important to make sure that we are delivering the best to our customers. And I'll get into how big tech has, over the years, tried to push the limits of what marketers and developers do in terms of user experience. I'll get into a little bit of how Google is changing our web experiences. But before I say that, for those of you who remember Adobe Flash back in the day, I think it was 2011, where Steve Jobs pretty much killed Flash by stopping the support of Flash on their devices, including the iPhones, iPads, and so on. And that wasn't necessarily a competitive approach, but more so to improve the web. Flash didn't provide a great web experience. And that's when HTML5 was born, and we started pushing the limits from there on. So how's Google doing this, and what are the benefits of it? So getting into here, more about the impact of UX on SEO and rankings. In 2010, Google announced that it would start taking site speed into account while determining rankings. That was more of a basic measure earlier days, decade ago. 8 years later, they announced taking page speed ranking into factor for mobile search results and ranking. And earlier this year, in 2020, I think it was in May, they announced that they're going to start factoring page user experience into rankings. And it has now been confirmed that as of May of 2021, that will go into effect, where the page user experience will be a factor of rankings for all of our sites. So the main reasons to keep in mind is not just ranking. Again, going back to how I was explaining how the big tech has pushed the limits with what we can do with technology and specifically web tech. We've also seen studies that have proven where users have shown clearly that they prefer sites with great page experiences. Forrester had a study done last year that showed sites with better UX, a 400% increase in their conversion rates, which is pretty important and very much valuable data. There's another study showing that for every dollar spent on UX, you have a return of about $100 on your conversion. So very clearly, the users are saying it, the studies are showing it, the big tech who, based on their data, are seeing the relevance and value, are pushing the limit and getting us all to improve what we're delivering in terms of our user experiences. So this basically goes without say that your businesses need to act. There's still 5 months left before this new update goes into place. And mind you, there's many other Google updates that go into place that we all need to keep in mind and keep up with them. But this specific one is one where there's a lot of technical potential issues that we'll walk through that you can resolve. But acting now will not only help you rank better, but will also get you to a place where you're serving your customers a much better experience, better conversions, better fan base, that people that keep coming back to your site. Let's keep all of that in mind.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Have you seen recent rumors that there's going to be more of an emphasis for page experience around the mobile signals rather than desktop? I haven't seen like complete documentation around this, but I saw some recent rumors in like some search engine land and SEO roundtable, and I was just curious, like as customers or as like SEOs, should we prioritize our mobile pages first rather than desktops for core web vitals?
Well, I shouldn't say one over the other. We definitely want to keep track of both, but there's a lot of validity to what you just said. A lot of other updates that have been pushed have been around mobile to begin with. So when you kind of look at something like this, you realize that mobile has been getting a lot more attention and has had a bigger factor. So definitely, I think it just compounds for sure. That's a great question. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank
cool. You. Yeah. So let's dive into and better understand how Google is measuring these experiences. So that we can be better equipped to handle the challenges. On top of everything that they've introduced to date, the new set of update relates to core web vitals. This is what they've outlined as quantifiable vitals that they're going to be measuring in terms of site speed, interactivity, and visual stability. Those are the 3 core items that we're going to go through here next. So if you notice, now we have 7 items, 7 signals that basically define what Google will be looking at in terms of page experience. In the past, we had the mobile friendliness, safe browsing, HTTPS, no intrusive interstitials, we'll briefly touch on those items. But the core items we'll be talking about today is the core web vitals, how they impact the experience, and how we go about resolving some of those challenges. So jumping into the Google Signals breakdown, the first of which is LCP, the largest content painful. What does that mean? Basically, when you're looking at a website, I'm going to quick jump here to the next item so I can talk through examples. So in this example provided by Google, we're looking at CNN's website. The largest content paint means the largest item that loads on the site. And when that loads, that's when we're going to look at this sort of marker to see, okay, did that fall under 2.5 seconds? Google calls that good. If it's over 2.5, it needs improvement. If it's over 4 seconds, kind of forget about it. And we're basically at this point only talking about the largest content piece. So if you look at this slow motion load of CNN site, you'll see that in the first screen we have this little piece that's the largest content object. Then it's this item, continues to remain this item of top title. And then in the last one where the page is loaded, it's the set of pictures that has the largest element. So they measure from the first content paint to the largest content paint, and that's called the LCP, and we want to keep that under 2.5 seconds. A lot of enterprise sites are aiming for 1 second in that area. Here's another example of where LCP, if you look at Google search, the first content paint is basically just the top bar. Immediately after that, the largest content paint is the area highlighted in green, which is the paragraph of result that's being displayed. Everything else outside of that is not considered the largest element. So as you can see, the first content paint to the largest content paint is almost immediate after, which makes that a very speedy load time, and it's Google, so they rank themselves the best. So getting into what are some of the causes of poor largest content paint. There's 4 areas that we look at. We look at slow server response times, render blocking JavaScript and CSS, resource load times, and client rendering. These are the 4 key areas that we look at when we're considering the items that you could be tackling to improve largest content paint. Slow server time is definitely one of the main factors we've run into with many websites. Having a really good server architecture that has proper setup, great use of content delivery network, great caching systems, and how your site is connecting to third parties, especially those that need to load content. Those are things that could help improve server response times. And as you can see, these get into being pretty technical. So almost the days of building a simple site and hoping that it's going to rank great is where kind of over, and we need to get into these deep technical challenges and resolve them. And again, I keep going back to what I started the conversation with, is that this is to improve the experience of our users that are coming to the site. We want to make sure that through these enhancements, they could immediately be seeing what is available on the site, is this the right information, and staying on the site, reducing that bounce rate. Getting into the render blocking JavaScript, there's a lot of ways that we could basically be minifying the content, compressing the style sheets, the JavaScript, and reducing unused code definitely helps this process. A lot of times developers go through and start coding and just leaving components that are not used, and it really adds up. Especially some of the newer frameworks could be pretty heavy, and it's important that we have a good handle on what is used for the site, what is not, what's not used we could take out and try and compress what's left. Resource load times, images. I've seen sites where the hero image is like 11 megabytes. There is no reason for that. There's no reason to not be able to optimize and compress images to a much smaller size, file size, yet continue to maintain that quality of image. That's really important. Preloading becomes very important. And what I really like to take advantage of as well in terms of resource load times is adaptive serving. And what that really means is, again, getting super technical, being able to identify network connection, and based on that network connection, delivering the right assets to the site. So if someone's in a rural area with very poor internet connection, again, you don't need to serve them the massive, super high quality image, for example. You can still get the point across with a lower quality and a much smaller image size. And then on the, yeah, go ahead.
So when I'm making recommendations to my client, at least to improve LCP or just to improve page speed in itself, one of the things that I always typically recommend, because it's a quicker win, is compression of images and optimizing them. Do you typically make that same recommendation, or do you think there's another area here that clients can take advantage of, or is it really case by case?
Compressing images, always 100% recommended. There's no need, no additional value to have images that are not fully optimized. So for sure, that's top of mind in terms of resource load times. But again, if you want to get more technical and deeper into it, there's the adaptive serving. Caching is super important. A lot of cases, caching, I've noticed that developers run into the challenge of not being able to properly show modifications to the site after a site's been cached. And there's a lot of tricks around that, which we can definitely talk afterwards in terms of Q&A. But caching should not prevent you from always delivering the most up-to-date content on your site. And it's definitely a great way to help deliver the best results, most optimized.
That's awesome. That's great. That's great context, because I'm not a developer and I'm not super technical. So that's typically the top recommendation that I'm making. So that's good to hear.
Awesome. Great. So jumping into the next signal, which is the first input delay, basically how responsive in terms of interactivity your site is, meaning how quickly when a page loads can I be clicking a button that potentially takes me to another page, or how quickly can I click into a form element and interact with the site. And Google's recommendation is 100 milliseconds. Anything above that is definitely, again, a challenge, a technical challenge that needs to get resolved and improved. So how do we resolve some of those, which are more than likely related to heavy use of JavaScript? We can break up long tasks. So if you have a lot of JavaScript that handle different tasks, that could be broken up and possibly loaded at different times as needed. Optimizing the page interaction readiness. Using Web Worker, what Web Worker does is it really makes it possible to run JavaScript on a background thread. So basically, again, instead of everything running at the same time to prepare that page, the page is prepared then in the background that Web Worker is running to perform other JavaScript execution. And all in all, improving your JavaScript. A lot of sites are using JavaScript heavily. So making sure that that's optimized, your developers are up to date with the latest and greatest improvements to the frameworks. Last but not least, the cumulative layout shift, or referred to also as visual stability. And this last element talks about how the elements on a page shift. We've all hit pages that things move around as, say, an ad pops in and all of a sudden everything else moves around. And those are unexpected user experiences that we want to avoid to a degree possible, and we want that measure to be less than a tenth of a second. And the ways that we can resolve that is by ensuring that a width and height attribute is always set for your image and video elements. You're reserving space for your ad and enforcing, these are sites that are serving ads, you want to reserve the space for it and enforce so that a different size ad doesn't randomly pop in. Avoid inserting random things within the site that, again, shifts the layout. And this all goes back to how the user experience of that site has been architected. We want to also preload whatever that we can in terms of fonts and so on. That's a great example of fonts when you don't have a different font that's used on the site preloaded, and that basically causes flashing and possibly shift in paragraphs and so on within the site. Good. So those were the 3 core web vitals, and I'm going to quick touch on the 4 previously provided guidelines from Google.
Before we get into some of these other areas of page experience, I had the core web vitals that you just previously reviewed. Is there like one specifically that you would recommend to focus on first, or one to prioritize for us, or does it differ? Because like when I first learned about core web vitals, like cumulative layout shift was one of the first things that I felt really affected or impacted page experience, just because from my own experience, like if I'm on a page on a website and stuff is moving around a lot, that's not a great experience for me and I'm gonna leave. So from your experience, just dealing with the technical side of it, is there one area to prioritize or care more about, or is it kind of all important?
They're all very important because, again, these are very complex calculations that Google is going, or any search engine, Google specifically, is going through to kind of prioritize your pages. One I would say is the loading one, CPL, because this one, I'm quick, sorry, flipping through these. As you can see, there's so many different aspects to it. And a lot of times the slow server response times, something that without proper measurement, we may not even notice it. As a website owner, if I'm hitting a website, it's my own site and it's already cached, it's going to be loading pretty fast for me, so I may not notice it versus someone that is coming into the site for the first time. And this slow server response time is something that could easily get handled on the server side without a whole lot of modification to the website itself. So delivering the site a whole lot faster, taking advantage of CDN and caching on the server side, those are things that could quickly resolve issues that could be a part of the biggest impact, not only for these, but in other experience areas as well.
That's great context. And I know that we have a question and answer at the end. However, I do see a really relevant question from Gina at HomeServe. Like, as an SEO manager, like, how should we minify CSS that's tied to our style guides and like structure? Like, is that kind of just like, should we just leave it as is and there's some CSS that we can never minify? Or should we bring the developers into the conversation and see if they can work their magic?
I would absolutely recommend making sure that developers are very familiar with these core web vitals. As you can see, almost all of it is technical, and it's important that whoever's developing, the team that's working on a website, they're familiar and they're tackling these issues. Specifically, when you get into minifying CSS, there's a lot of tools that help with that, and also technical know-how. So it's important that the developers get involved immediately.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And just before we move on, I know we're using a lot of technical terms here. So for some non-developers, would you just give a brief explanation around what server-side rendering is before we move on?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically the answer is more technical as well, but I'll give the answer anyway. But basically, when we're loading a website in our browser, what has happened prior to that is a request from our browser is made to the server, to the cloud, to retrieve that page. And that's where we want to improve and enhance that sort of response time from the server and how that content is delivered back to the user's browser.
That's awesome. I'll explain it like in 5. Like instead of the web page displaying on the server, it's rendered, or instead of rendering on the browser, it's displayed on the server. So if you want more education around that, we're happy to provide some links to make sure that everyone's fully aware of what these mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So quick going through to follow through with the remaining 4 items on the signals. Mobile friendly, we're all familiar with that. It's been around for a few years now, and there's basically a few mistakes that you want to avoid to a degree possible. It's not, 1980, so those are not the mobile phones anymore. Everybody is on their mobile. Majority of site stats we look at, mobile is probably a lot higher than desktop, if not equivalent. So definitely you want to keep those in mind. If you're going through a redesign, rebuild of your site, make sure that the user experience is mobile first. I know it's a lot harder for us to look at beautiful design and so on a mobile screen and then reimagine that for the desktop, but that's how you need to sort of shift the mindset and focus on mobile first and then kind of go back to the desktop implementation. Another big mistake is that I still see it is where mobile display results for a website are on a subdomain. Like if you go way back, it used to be like m.domain.com, and some sites still do that, and that's a big mistake. A lot of this push has been to create experiences that work across different platforms, and that's why mobile responsive term is there, so that whatever we can just literally stretch that browser to make it work on a tablet device, a mobile device, or a desktop. And for sure, don't work in isolation. There's a lot of great knowledge out there, a lot of great examples, so make sure that you're taking advantage of all that. Next, I've got a couple of good examples of intrusive interstitials. This is one where I'm showing here both desktop and mobile. As you can see, when from desktop we've responded to the mobile, that interstitial literally remains there and prevents from the user from getting into the site content unless they're hitting the X that no thank you. And Google is going to start penalizing these type of interstitials. There's sort of that gray area where we call the gray hat interstitials, the coupon pop-ups, sticky sidebars, related posts, share buttons, live chat. Those are not yet being penalized. There's two set that for sure are being penalized, which is geolocation language. Those are no longer recommended as a pop-up. And responsive scroll boxes that literally stick with you as you're going. We want to avoid those. In this case, there's no penalty just yet, but that's coming. A better way of implementing what I have here on screen is something like this, where on the desktop, you can see the pop-up in the middle of the page, but when you respond on a mobile, it actually goes up to the top and it stays there, as opposed to kind of in the middle of the page and preventing the user from interacting with the site content. There's two more items. Safe browsing. This is super important. Every site gets hacked from time to time. It's important to be aware of that. So registering your site with Google Search Console will definitely notify of any kind of malware, deceptive pages, harmful downloads, uncommon downloads. These are things that unless we're notified, they could be sitting on a site. And if Google detects that, they will basically show this red screen of death that as soon as a user clicks search result to go to the site, they're going to be presented by this red screen, and anybody who sees this basically will avoid going to that site. So do yourself a favor, sign up with Google Search Console and be notified of these types of issues on the site. And then lastly, HTTPS, Google started enforcing this, and if a site does not have a SSL certificate and there's interactivity on the site, let's say there's a form, I shouldn't say interactivity, if there's a form where content, user entered content is communicated to the server side, and there is no SSL certificate, Google will definitely tag that as a non-secure site, and you'll also see it in your URL bar in the browser. SSL certificates in general are really great to have. There's 3 layers of protection that they add in authentication, proving to the user that is the site that they requested from the browser when they clicked the link and the site wasn't hijacked. So those 3 factors alone, in addition to Google marking the site as non-secure altogether, will create a better user experience. Sums up all of the 7 signals and things we want to keep in mind to improve our experiences for our site visitors. Next
Amazing.
up, Zach, did you want to tackle this? Great, of course.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to talk about how we can take action on this. You just gave a really, really in-depth presentation around all the different metrics that go into this. But to be honest, I'm not as technical. I'm more on the SEO side. So when I'm making recommendations to my clients, they're always wearing many hats, or they're not super technical as well. So they're always trying to figure out, like, how do we take action as SEOs, and how do we prioritize this stuff at scale? So what I'm going to walk through right now is like the workflow that I recommend to really take action on the metrics that Bahman just really broke down. The first step here is to really identify the pages or the group of pages that need the help the most. Then after we start to identify these groups of pages or what specific pages are hindering our page speed, we should start to understand the issues that exist on each page template, and then be able to prioritize and address these at scale with the dev team so that they can understand what the issue they need to fix based off of impact and based off of effort. So I know that might sound a little overwhelming at first, but here are some tools that we can really use to better understand this. If you are a conductor client, then you will have access to Deep Crawl. And one of the metrics, or one of the reports, that Deep Crawl recently released was something called performance metrics. And this ties directly to Core Web Vitals. So what it does is when you do a web crawl, it actually groups together your pages based off of good, average, or poor scores, and it breaks down all the specific metrics that Bahman just broke down. So it has cumulative layout shift, it has time to interactivity, it has DOM content load. It has all of these metrics within the Deep Crawl performance report, and it allows us to prioritize at scale which pages are creating issues. And the best part of it is, like, Deep Crawl is single sign-on, and it's running in the cloud. So say we make changes to these pages, we can rerun this crawl later on and compare it to see what was fixed, what is outstanding, or maybe other issues that actually still occur here. And if you are a conductor client, or if you don't have Deep Crawl, there's a lot of other tools that we can use as well to help with this, one of them being Google Search Console. I assume every webmaster has access to their own Google Search Console for their company, and one of the things that they recently released when they announced Core Web Vitals was a report that's tied directly to it. So it actually breaks down groups of pages, and this is based off of field data, but it does break down groups of pages that are poor, need improvement, and also that are good from a desktop and a mobile device. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a few rumors that some of these Core Web Vital metrics might only be applying to mobile device. So if anything, let's take a look at our mobile device pages first, see how we can improve them, and then move on to desktop later on. But it is important to prioritize all of these pages in themselves. Another thing I always recommend is just take a look at page speed insights. Like, to be fair, sometimes this data is it changes from a day-to-day basis because it is based off of what Google's seeing within Chrome. But the reason I like to use page speed insights is because I like to test out these different templates. Like, I like to test out, for example, like a home page, a category page, a product page. If you're not an e-com site, it could just be 3 different templates. The reason I'm picking different templates, though, is because those templates are usually built with very similar things, and the developers can easily understand what's causing or hindering these pages just by looking at these different templates. So that's really why I like to use page speed insights, because I just want to quickly understand the different metrics related to these templates. But there are a ton of other page speed tools like GT metrics and other page speed tools that you can really help identify this. But like, if you're still like, okay, I know how to get the metrics, but like, how do I prioritize this still? Like, what pages should I focus on first? I would really then just, as an SEO, do like an organic performance report. If you're a part of Conductor client, ask your SSM if they can run a content performance report, or do an analysis around your keyword rankings to understand which pages rank for the most keywords or which pages bring in the most traffic. Because if they have some page speed issues and are bringing in a lot of traffic already, imagine if they didn't have page speed issues. You could bring in a lot more traffic and rank for more keywords. I also recommend to kind of benchmark your performance, traffic, conversions, keywords for page 1 and page 2 prior to making these changes, just to monitor it. See if anything happened. See if you were negatively impacted, if you were positively impacted. The main thing here is, like, when Google gives us time to make updates to our site, They did this with the mobile first indexing. They're doing this with Core Web Vitals. When they give us time and they announce, hey, this change is coming, we really need to listen to them and take action on what we need to do here, because they don't really always give us information on what to do. And when they do, they mean it. So we should really prioritize the pages that are impacted the most to make sure that we're not hit with an algorithm update come Core Web Vitals. So to really summarize all this up is, after you really prioritize the pages that need to be fixed, send a ticket to your development team. You can use actions if you're a Conductor client. You can send it to your own Basecamp management system, but then test this before releasing the product, or test this before releasing to production. You want to make sure that you fix everything that was addressed within the reports that we just reviewed, and then monitor it. See if it worked and replicate it moving forward for your other pages. So I know that we just covered a lot in terms of the specific metrics that go into Core Web Vitals, and then how to actually take action on this. So now we're going to dedicate some time to answering the questions. So feel free to type in any questions in the Q&A, and we'll start to address them one by one. Awesome. So it looks like the first question we have here is, from Richard Lee at CINA, how important is AMP? So I can take this to start, and Bahman, please provide any other context around this as well. But I mean, AMP was definitely very important early on from a publisher's perspective, because you wanted to get into those top stories area. And just from a mobile experience standpoint, AMP pages load really, really quickly. It kind of seems like to me, with this release of Core Web Vitals, and even Google announced that non-AMP pages can actually become eligible for the top stories. I kind of think that Google's kind of moving away from AMP with this release. But Bahman, I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, I'm basically on the same page, where there was a big push for AMP, and I think that's basically with what we're seeing with Core Web Vitals. Everything is moving in that direction. We want to have faster load times for all pages, not just specific pages. And I think with that concept, they are realizing and kind of going away from pushing AMP. Absolutely.
Awesome. And then moving back to interstitial ads, is the reason a pop-up on mobile is a no-no is because of the size?
That's a very good question, Elena. And I think basically you can have pop-ups, and there's three categories. There's ones that you want to avoid, and that's where you're preventing the user from interacting with the site content unless they interact with the pop-up. And like the example I was showing, where on the desktop you have the pop-up in the middle of the page, and the user can easily still interact with the content. Or when you're on mobile, that gets pushed up to the top or the bottom. That's a great way to go about it. And then there's some of those that are sort of in the gray area, and I'm sure eventually Google's gonna start penalizing those middle gray area items as well. But you can still use pop-ups, you just wanna design them correctly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Google just wants the best experience for the user. So just make sure your pop-ups are natural. Make sure when you have an interstitial ad, it works when your user is transitioning at a certain point. Like when they concluded a task, or something imagine if you completed a game level and you saw a pop-up, that's a natural transition. So just make sure that when you do this on your site, it's natural.
Exactly.
So Jill from St. Jude says, at times, PageSpeed Insights doesn't seem to provide data on real experience users are getting. What tools do you recommend to test Core Web Vitals for pages so we understand the true performance of a page? I covered a few of those tools in my section, but I would really use all the data that we have available to us. I would use Google Search Console data. I would use deep crawl performance metrics. I would sometimes rely on PageSpeed Insights or GT metrics just to add a little bit extra layers of data. But Bahman, are there any specific tools you're using that we haven't necessarily mentioned that you would take advantage of for this?
The only other item I'd add, and this is more for developers that are building sites, is within Google Developer Tools Lighthouse, data is definitely beneficial and good to take advantage of, especially as a developer, because as you're building pages and sites, you want to make sure that you're testing and not when your work is done to have to go back and do a bunch of refactoring and optimization.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see the next question. So,
while you're looking at that, I was looking at questions and I realized I misspoke with an earlier question about server-side rendering, and my response was more so about how you optimize your server. I didn't fully understand the question at the time, but that's actually a really good one, and a common approach to building websites where server-side rendering means that instead of delivering, all the content, your HTML, your CSS, JavaScript, everything to the browser and let the browser handle how that all looks. Instead, all of that rendering happens on the server side, and the only thing that's delivered to the user side is HTML. So there's no rendering happening there, and a lot of headless solutions are taking advantage of that. That's more complicated to achieve, but definitely a whole lot speedier because the user side doesn't have to do anything and the page is fully rendered when it's delivered to them.
Awesome. I appreciate you clarifying that. And we have some questions that kind of break down like which metrics do you think Google's really paying attention to? We're seeing different metrics within our page speed insights. From my perspective, I like to consume as much data as possible to make a more data-driven, insightful approach to this. I do take page speed insights with a grain of salt. It is very different on a day-to-day basis. I still think it helps inform you on what the issues are so a developer can take more action on it. Specifically, when you do break it up by templates, you'd be surprised how familiar the developers are with the specific template on your site. And then in addition to like what platform I prefer, I really use all of these. Again, I don't like to rely on specifically one. I use my client's Google Search Console. I use Conductor for content performance and keyword rankings. I use Deep Crawl as well to make this analysis. I just think it's beneficial to have as much information as possible before you kind of prioritize it with your developers.
Yeah, definitely agree on that.
So is it better to approach your site as a mobile app first? I'm not entirely sure the definition. When I refer to, I'm not sure if mobile app was the correct term here, but I definitely think we should take a mobile first approach. I mean, that's really what Google's always been stating, that they are moving to a mobile first index as well for crawling your content and indexing and ranking it. And that's what they seem like they're doing with Core Web Vitals as well. I mean, to be honest, Google wants the best experience for their users. The majority of their users are searching on a mobile device on a day-to-day basis. So that's really what they're prioritizing when it comes to search. Don't ignore your desktop site. Make sure they're responsive. Make sure that they have the same content. But I'm always looking from a mobile-first perspective. What's your thoughts, Bahman?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think we're talking about mobile first, and like I mentioned, giving a lot more attention to mobile when you begin makes the life easier to then go to desktop and make those improvements. It's much more complicated on mobile. It's harder to design for mobile. So once you resolve that, when you have much more space on the desktop, that makes things easier. So definitely keep mobile first as the approach that you're taking. There's very few cases where we look at solutions out there that the users are only desktop, and those are very specific cases. So we could just leave that aside and focus on mobile first, for sure.
Got it. And I think there is just a clarification from one question. is what's the difference between user and lab scores for page speed insights, and is Google really paying attention to one or the other?
I'm sorry, can you say that one again? I didn't catch that. What was the question?
Yeah, I think we misinterpreted one question. It was really around what's the difference between user and lab scores for page speed insights, and does Google pay attention to one or the other, or both?
Google is definitely paying attention to both. It's not one or the other, so we want to take advantage of what they're looking at, and all of these are informative to us as marketers and developers to take advantage of and improve that end experience. So both of them for sure.
Awesome, I appreciate that. And Andrew from Rush Enterprises is actually asking a question around one of your slides, Bahman, around geolocation. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why geolocation language worsens our score? Is using browser-based geolocation not optimal?
Yeah, so basically there's a lot of great technology that can help automate that process by enabling the user to be dropped into, say, a location-specific or language-specific content based on where they're coming from, what their IP address is, and without the need to basically have a big pop-up that says, pick your language. Those could now sit within the site. So I'm just giving you an example. If I enter a site that's German and I expected it to be English, I could easily change that at the top of the site as opposed to having this big barrier up front and making me make the decision before even seeing the content of the page. So we want to avoid those as big pop-ups and making the user decide. An example I always use is, say, a liquor company that sells alcohol having a pop-up to detect if you're 21 or not is super important. So we don't want to show the page content before you've actually said that you're over 21. So that's a great sort of pop-up that prevents the content. Whereas something like this, we shouldn't prevent the user. They can still see the page content and then optimize it for their experience by selecting a different language or location.
That's great. And I think that really breaks down like the user experience. You want the user to have the best experience on the page, and that allows them to select the language or the location that they're in the most. And I think that's a good segue into the next question around how much does accessibility impact SEO these days, because that's really coming down to user experience. I mean, there's nothing more important around a site than accessibility and a user experience, because imagine if you were blind and like you needed a screen reader to interpret what was on the page. That's really important for user experience as well. And when you intersect that with like SEO, the thing that I always think of is anchor text and internal links. Like, to me, internal links is one of the most important things on our site, because we can truly influence it with the anchor text. So imagine if like on your site you just had click here. That's not really, one, helpful for SEO because you're not using relevant keywords, and two, it's not as helpful to someone who's potentially blind because they don't know what they're clicking on. So I recommend to make it as to make your site not only ADA compliant so you're not getting sued. I mean, there was a recent case where Domino's it went to the Supreme Court. Beyonce was even sued, so no one's really safe, honestly, when it comes to ADA compliance. And it's also really helpful for improving our site from a keyword ranking standpoint. Xivic is a really trusted partner of conductors when conducting ADA audits, and they've really helped a lot of my clients when it comes to ADA.
Yeah.
Anything else to add here, Bahman?
No, that's definitely an important aspect to keep in mind for various reasons. And like you said, we have a lot of experience and can help in that area for sure. Yeah.
We have another question, Bahman, around one of your slides. It said that live chatbots would be penalized by Google. Are chatbots on the site being penalized the same?
Well, no, I didn't say they are. Hang on, let's go back to that slide. Make sure that we're looking at the same thing. So that's what we're calling great hat, meaning that right now they're not being penalized. So live chatbots. Anything that's under the gray hat area is not being penalized. There's only like 2 that we know for sure that are being penalized. Live chat boxes, as long as they're not intrusive, especially when you go on the mobile responsive. Well, I've seen a lot of cases where on desktop it's a small component within the desktop interface, but when you go responsive, it's not properly designed, and it's taking the entire interface where, again, the user can't see or interact with the page content. Not being penalized yet, but there's a good chance that that can come up and be added to the list.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Let's see, the next one is if you were moving a module from desktop and changing the placement on mobile, will that affect the CLS negatively? And what techniques would you use to do this? JavaScript?
To move what aspect? Zach, can you read the question again? I didn't catch.
Yeah, let me see. Let me bring it back up again. If you were moving a module from desktop and changing the placement on mobile, will that affect the cumulative layout shift negatively? And what techniques would you use to do this? Would you use JavaScript or something else?
Got it. So I guess when you're going from a desktop to mobile, that's the responsive aspect. So if you're sitting on your desktop and you basically reduce the width of your browser, you see things shift. That's not a real world experience. You're either on your desktop or on your mobile. So the way that we're presenting on mobile is automatically going to be rendered in that sort of layout, and that's not an impact on what we're talking about in terms of visual stability. The visual stability is that when the page is loaded, then there's shifts. Then there's like new content coming in, an ad popping in that shifts things around that are unexpected to the user. So if you're solely talking about the responsive aspect, that's not an issue, and we shouldn't have to worry about that.
Cool, that's awesome. Let's see, The next one is server-side rendering a way to avoid having difficult browsers show certain page elements slightly differently, a rollover effect, etc.?
It's not going to affect display. It will affect in terms of, again, to confirm if I'm understanding the question, you're asking about server-side rendering versus client-side rendering. The end result is going to have to be the same if implemented correctly. So that shouldn't impact anything in that area.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There's another question around. We were serving pages from CMS and using server-side JavaScript rendering a lot of our image and lots of image resources. What do you suggest for improving the page load times here?
Oh boy, well, we're getting into much more technical that without a proper audit, it's difficult to give you an exact solution. But if you have a lot of images, I would definitely say make sure that you have a CDN in place, a content delivery network for your image assets. That would definitely improve the speeds quite a bit. But as it relates to the JavaScript, it's much more technical and definitely deserves a detailed look at before an answer.
Totally fair.
Awesome. So we are at 9 o'clock here, so I want to make sure that if there's one last question you want to get in, Zach, or do you feel like maybe we can take those after?
Yeah, if we didn't get to your question, we can keep track of that. We can follow up one-off to make sure that every question was answered. Again, we will be sending this out as a recording, and I believe we're trying to work to get this in a PDF format as well. I know we have some requests around getting some of these slides. So yes, we will make sure to answer all the questions directly after this call. But again, we appreciate everyone's time, and we hope that you learned a lot around Core Web Vitals and how to take action on this. And again, if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to Bahman or myself, and we're more than happy to discuss this in more depth. But again, thanks everyone for joining today.
Thank you, everyone.